Many Canadians struggle with various forms of mental health issues. Often there's a stigma attached to it, but there is hope for people. Today's guest went through some serious, tough times before becoming free from anxiety issues. Sarah Ball is a blogger, public speaker, and author of Fearless in 21 Days, A Survivor's Guide to Overcoming Anxiety. Welcome to Bridge City News, Sarah.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So here it is, your book. You wrote this book out of your own personal experiences with anxiety. Tell me how you overcame all of those challenges.
Well, I started having anxiety probably in my mid-30s. It started off actually as burnout. I just had my 5th child,
Wow.
Exhausted, of course.
Yeah.
Went through a series of traumatic events back to back that really kind of elevated my stress. And it started off with a panic attack. And I'd had one before, a couple years before, and dealt with it. It was fine, but it didn't go away. And I continued to have panic attacks every day. And eventually that escalated into a full-blown general anxiety disorder. So it's kind of what you would call a nervous breakdown, which I hate using that term, but that's what it was. And I became physically, mentally, and spiritually completely depleted. And yeah, my mental health just took a nosedive.
Did your husband and maybe your kids say, did we help contribute to this? We're so sorry, Mom or honey, like what happened
No,
there?
I don't think
No?
so. I
Okay.
think that it was such, it seemed like it happened overnight, but if I look back at it, it was really a slow derail, starting with fatigue, starting with, feeling burnt out and a little bit of depression mixed in there and just not taking care of my mental health. So I don't feel like they blame themselves at all. No.
How many people do you feel really struggle with anxiety and depression? Is it more common than we realize?
Yes. Absolutely more common than we realize. I minister to a lot of people who struggle with anxiety, OCD, and depression. And I have had emails and people reaching out to me who are, 50-year-old business executives in Toronto, to nurses, to counselors and therapists, to 18-year-olds, to 90 years old. Like, this is something that is...
It affects everyone.
Yeah, and it's no respecter of persons. So anxiety, I think, is very chronic right now.
What do you think are the underlying roots of anxiety? Is it a lot of stress and pressures we put on ourselves today?
Yeah.
Or maybe our bosses put on us?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of a few things. I think that it's all can be physical, mental, and spiritual. It's kind of a combination, and everybody has a different sort of makeup of how they are, right? So someone could have had anxiety from the time they were born. It can be something to do with their makeup, and other people it can be from traumatic experiences, and then yes, high stress, high pressure culture, hustle hard, right? Achieve everything, perfection, and do it at the cost of your mental health.
So Sarah, you mentioned earlier about fatigue, but what are some of the other red flags or warning signs that we really have to watch out for that we may be suffering from anxiety or depression?
Well, anxiety and depression surprisingly manifests physically. And usually that's the first sign. So there is the mental part of it for sure, the worried thoughts, the obsessive thoughts, the sad thoughts, all that kind of stuff. But usually when you know that it's gotten to an unhealthy place, it really shows up in your body. So heart palpitations, fatigue, headaches, body aches, chest pains, you name it. I'm pretty sure that people who struggle with anxiety and depression feel it all over their body.
So do you think maybe a holiday to Hawaii, somewhere tropical, will really alleviate the symptoms right away?
Well, sometimes it's true. You have to be able to create a balance in your life, and rest and play is a huge part of that. Absolutely.
How do you know when it's time to go to your doctor, though, your physician?
Well, I think when it starts to affect your everyday life, when it's starting to affect your relationships, when it's starting to affect the fact that you're not going out anymore, that you've really made your life small. So a lot of people who struggle with anxiety and depression, their life gets very small. Very isolated, that's a big one. And then physical symptoms as well. Of course, suicidal thoughts, anything that's very severe, and just not feeling like yourself. I think you need to have a conversation with your doctor.
Now, what about a panic attack? What does that actually look like? How can I tell if one is coming on?
Well, a lot of people mix up anxiety attack and a panic attack, thinking an anxiety attack is just excessive worry or, I'm freaking out because I have to speak publicly or whatever. But a panic attack is actually a physiological thing that happens to your body. So they've actually been able to scientifically show you that it lasts 20 minutes. So it's actually a thing that happens to your body. So what happens is when you are faced with a potentially dangerous situation, right? Your body goes in to protect itself. So it's actually a gift God's given us. It's something that's created within us to be able to protect ourselves, to be able to think on our feet, to be able to run away as fast as we can, to have the adrenaline and the strength that we need to fight a situation. But when you're dealing with panic attack, all that stuff's happening to your body because of nothing. It just comes out of nowhere. And so oftentimes it begins with pain in the chest, but the heart palpitations, shortness of breath, I can't breathe, and racing thoughts. But the worst part, which is very common with people with panic disorder, is a sense of impending doom.
Oh.
I'm going to die.
Wow.
Like you have an absolute conviction that you're about to die. And so even though, whatever the trigger was or wherever this panic attack's coming from, you logically know in your head that you're not going to die, but the intense emotion of that is very strong.
Now, you also struggled with OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. Can you really explain to our viewers what exactly that is?
Well,
and how you overcame it?
Yes, a lot of people think obsessive compulsive disorder is just you need to have everything clean and perfect, but that couldn't be farther from the truth.
Okay.
And I know we throw that word out there a lot of times, but there are many different forms of OCD. And basically what it is it starts with the obsession. So it's obsessive thoughts, which is an anxious thought, right? So if I touch this thing, I'm going to get sick. Or if this happens, then this bad thing's going to happen. So it's a thought that you begin to obsess about. And the compulsions are behaviors that you do to actually ease the thought. So where you get the excessive hand washing. So I'll touch something, I have a thought that I'm going to die, I might get sick. And so if I go to wash my hands, it doesn't feel better. So I wash my hands twice. Then I wash my hands 3 times. Then I wash my hands 5 times.
Wow.
And then at the 5th time, or however long it takes, I start to feel better. That creates a pattern. So then you're like, in order for me to ease the anxiety, I have to wash my hands 5 times. For me, what I struggled with was harm OCD, which isn't spoken about much. It's one of the most common forms of OCD, which is actually sheer terror and anxiety about hurting yourself or someone you love.
Now, in your study and your research, dealing with a lot of these different conditions, whether it's OCD or anxiety and depression, was there ever any talk of maybe minerals and vitamins helping as well, or supplements to try and help you get back on track?
Well,
physically?
I think that's part of it. I never really discovered any specific thing. And I think a lot of people who struggle with anxiety go down this route of trying to heal it through the body, which is a huge part of healing. And anyone who's going through it, you have to talk to your doctor. You need to get your blood tested, all those stuff, because there definitely is a lot of medical conditions that can really bring on anxiety and high adrenaline and stuff like that. So it's really important. But it's a balance. And so it's really important. Exercise is really important. Eating well is really important, and taking care of your mental and spiritual health as well.
How about antidepressants? How much of a role would they play, do you think?
I think that with antidepressants, I'm not a doctor, but with antidepressants, when it comes to depression, it can actually help heal depression. It can actually help boost your serotonin levels and get you kind of on a right path. With anxiety, it does not. It just sort of masks it for the time. But if you're drowning, sometimes you need to have something to keep you afloat to be able to do the deeper work and be able to deal with the roots. So I absolutely believe in medication, that there's a time and a place for it, and but not to put all of your faith into that. That's just a small part of your whole healing. A lot of people just go to medical route and not deal with the deeper issues, and then they're stuck on it for the rest of their lives. So
some psychologists I've spoken with in the past in regards to people considering taking their own lives, suicide, they say there are a lot of warning signs. They always talk about doing it, but then eventually when you don't hear them talk about it anymore, that's when you need to be concerned.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I mean, this is a real issue. There's, from young children to teenagers to middle-aged women to grown men. I mean, suicidal thoughts can become very intense and very real. I know it's something that I had experienced as well. Very terrifying for the person who has experienced it. But, first of all, it's so important that we get help, that you surround yourself in all ways, whether it's psychologist, therapist, doctor, and you just have a team of people working with you.
Right?
A support group.
Yeah.
It's really, really important. And yeah.
It's interesting too, a lot of the psychologists I've interviewed in the past, they say the person who's considering taking their own life, you say, well, that's being very selfish. You can leave your wife, your kids behind, your friends, your parents. They don't think about that.
No.
It's very self-absorbed,
They're
self-centered.
thinking of the pain.
The pain.
They just want it to go away. Not necessarily the consequence, but the pain and the emptiness that they feel. Absolutely.
So how much of a difference does it really help to have maybe somebody go alongside with you in the journey, maybe an accountability partner or a good friend that understands and knows exactly where you came from and where you're headed?
Well, one of the first things my doctor said to me is the 2 things that work more efficiently than medication is exercise and community. That those two things have been shown and proven to actually help mental health more than anything else, even more than medication. So it's absolutely vital that you have a community and a support system. And not everybody has, because there is a stigma attached to mental illness. Not always spouses really understand or friends really understand what you're going through. This is something I experienced. My husband was an amazing support to me, but I did have some people in my lives that didn't understand it and just said, well, stop thinking about it then. We'll just, snap out of it, because they were used to me being strong.
Snap out of it.
They weren't used to me being like that. This was something very different for them to see me go through this.
Well, let me ask you, Sarah, what things should we say and not say to somebody who may be going through that journey of depression and maybe even suicidal thoughts?
Well, absolutely.
Snap out of it.
Do not say,
no.
just stop thinking about it, because they
Right.
can't. It's a mental illness. That's like trying to tell someone with diabetes, just stop, stop being sick. I mean, you can't do that, right?
Or stop eating lots of pies and cakes.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
my
So I think the most important thing is I always say, is to ask them, what can I do? And if you're the one struggling, to articulate what it is you need. This doesn't help me, this helps me when you say this. And to help them get out of their head, to have a safe place to share really uncomfortable and scary thoughts that might seem ridiculous to you, and you might go, oh my gosh, that's ridiculous, but to them it's so absolutely real. And it's definitely more intense when they keep it to themselves and they're obsessing and mulling over these thoughts. But the minute they have a safe place to articulate it without any judgment or it being dismissed quickly as, oh, that's just dumb, they have a safe place to share, and it just eases the anxiety of it.
I'm glad you brought that up, because one of my close family members was battling alcoholism, and I had a really hard time not knowing what to say, how I could support this individual, right? So I went to Al-Anon,
Awesome.
with family members
Yeah.
who are dealing with alcoholism, right, in the family. And they said the number one thing to do, so the defense walls, the walls don't go up, is to say to this person, do you love me? And this person says, of course I love
Yeah.
you. I have a problem. Can you please help me with my problem? Yes, I have a problem with your drinking. Can you please help me?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So just interesting how
Yeah.
they kind of switched it,
Yeah.
the roles,
Interesting.
and it actually worked, to be honest with you.
Wow. That's interesting. Yeah.
So the walls didn't go up saying,
Yeah,
you've
yeah.
got a problem, you're pointing
Yeah,
the finger,
yeah.
but I have the problem.
Yes.
Can you please help me with my problem?
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yes.
At the end of the day, they still got a problem.
Yeah, that's right.
But I mean, this is how we're going to help people, right, at
Yeah.
the same time.
Yeah, that's right. Because someone who's struggling with anxiety and depression, they don't want to.
No.
If they could just stop, they absolutely would choose to not.
And don't
right?
they have to almost hit rock bottom and say, you know what, I realize that I have an issue in my life that needs to be addressed? It's the same
Yes.
thing with smokers a lot
Yeah.
of times. I don't have
Yeah.
a problem with smoking, I'm
Yeah.
fine. You should quit. I don't
Yeah.
want to quit, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But somebody has to start from within, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. Which is really hard when you're struggling with anxiety and depression, because there's not a lot of strength there
Right.
to pull yourself up. And that's
Right.
the hardest part. And that's why people get really stuck in it for years and years at a time, because you really don't have a lot of inner strength and mental strength to be able to do it. And so I really believe that there are tools and there are ways to actually rewire and renew your mind, and disciplines that we can take that are really difficult in the beginning, but actually make a huge difference. Yeah.
So Sarah, how were you finally set free?
Well, definitely not an overnight experience for me. I felt like I needed to take the hard way out in order for me to be able to help others. So that's something I really believe. For me, it was really paying attention to all three aspects of myself: my body, my mind, and my spirit. I really needed to cut down on a lot of the reasons why I was taking on so much and doing so much and simplifying my life. Rest became a huge weapon for me, learning to rest, even if it was at the judgment of other people, that, whatever. That was really important for me. Exercise was really important, and learning to take my thoughts captive, learning to understand, why I was thinking the way that I did, learning to sort of have conversations with myself to help myself get out of it. So I did a lot of work, but for me, the very sort of defining moment of my whole healing that continues to be my maintenance in every area of my life is just being able to fall back on this foundation of the love of God. That's been huge for me, because oftentimes you'll find that people who struggle with anxiety, this theology is a little bit messy.
Sarah Ball, blogger, public speaker, and author of Fearless in 21 Days, A Survivor's Guide to Overcoming Anxiety. Thanks so much for joining us here
Yeah,
on Bridge
thanks
City
for
News.
having me. Appreciate it.